So, when I was in high school, I always wanted to look for new music that I had never heard of before and didn't really have access to the internet. So, the way that I would do this was usually by going to the record store for hours and looking through the discount CD bins. And back at home, my mom had some old tapes and CDs and records that I would occasionally listen to, and I found this one tape called An Evening with Jean Ritchie, and I had never heard of her, but I put the tape in and really loved what I heard. It was this sweet old lady telling these stories of growing up in Perry County, Kentucky in the early 1900s, and how she lived in this really musical family. She was the youngest of 14 children, and all of them sang, and their parents were really musical and taught them all these songs that had been passed down through generations. And there was a song for every activity you could think of, whether it was baking bread, milking a cow, sweeping the floor, about to kiss someone for the first time, you see a squirrel, you're walking through the woods, just anything you can think of, there's a song for it to accompany you while you're experiencing it. And her family was kind of famous at the time for being so musical and having access to all these folk songs. And when people would come through doing research and collecting songs for ethnomusicology projects and things, they would often interview her family members. And I would just lie in bed listening to this tape over and over, and it got me thinking, I only ever really hear really trained, developed voices, and her voice is kind of high and strange, like mine. My voice is kind of high and strange, and I never really thought of myself as a singer, someone who could have any value singing to other people, because I definitely had no training, but I really loved what I heard, and so I thought if she could sound that cool, maybe I could do this kind of music, and it would work out. And so as a teenager, I started writing these eerie mountain ballads inspired by Jean Ritchie. And she was taught dulcimer and a few other instruments when she was growing up, and she went to the University of Kentucky, where she got a degree in social work in the 1940s, and then she moved to Manhattan and started teaching at an elementary school and doing social work and teaching music to the children. And she became friends with the other folkies who lived in Manhattan at that time, like Alan Lomax, Pete Seeger, Leadbelly, and also got to play often with Woody Guthrie and Oscar Brand, and they all really loved her because she had such a direct line to this oral tradition of these songs, and she really grew up in the mountains, and so she was quite a gem to them. And she was also really influenced by them, and instead of just doing her daily songs that she knew and her religious songs, she started writing some political songs. And because it was the 50s and 60s, she decided to publish these songs under a man's name, Fan Hall, partly because she didn't want her mother knowing that she was writing political songs, and partly because at that time she thought that her songs would be taken more seriously if people thought they were written by a man instead of a woman. And she's sometimes called the mother of folk and credited with bringing the dulcimer to a more public audience. And it was this kind of exotic instrument that had been developed from other instruments brought over to America from Germany and other parts of Europe, that was just developed in these secluded rural mountain areas. But once she started getting kind of famous and playing a lot and playing dulcimer, some other people were really inspired to use that instrument, and you'll hear it on Joni Mitchell albums and Judy Collins and Bob Dylan. And so she she, being from Perry County, Kentucky, was witnessing a lot of the direct effects of mountaintop removal and strip mining that was going on there. And so she wrote a song called Black Waters that is about that. And even though it was written in the 60s, it's more and more relevant today as an environmental song. And so that's the song I'm going to do for you.